Have you ever felt like you're pushing with all your might, but something unseen is pushing right back? Well, today we're going to break down an incredible framework that identifies the invisible forces it says are at war with your destiny, and more importantly, how you can actually win. So let's dive into this idea of the unseen war.
Okay, so this is the idea that kicks everything off. The core premise is that the spiritual realm doesn't get sarcasm. It doesn't care if you're just kidding. Every single word that comes out of your mouth is taken literally, as a binding law. It's a pretty radical thought, and it completely reframes the power of everything we say.
And that right there leads us straight into this first big concept, the legal power of your words. The argument is that when you speak, you're not just making noise, you're legislating. You're actually creating spiritual realities, whether for good or for bad. So what this does is it completely changes how you see yourself. You're not just a follower, you're designated as a legislator. That means every complaint, every fear you speak out loud, every declaration of victory, it all carries the weight of law in the spiritual world. It's actually shaping the circumstances all around you.
Now, if our words are really that powerful, you're probably asking, why do things still feel so tough? Why is there so much resistance? Well, this framework gives a very specific answer. There are active forces of resistance pushing against your advancement. Let's break down exactly what those forces are said to be.
All right, so there are four distinct sources of opposition laid out here. First, other people. Second, you've got the natural world in your circumstances. Third, a spiritual adversary. And fourth, and this might be the most surprising one, you. We're going to take a look at each one of these. The first force is human. The classic example used is Pharaoh, someone who actively stood in the way of a whole nation's destiny. Now, think about that in your own life. It could be a boss who keeps passing you over for a promotion, or even family members who, with good intentions, discourage your dreams. The point is that some people can act as gatekeepers. And advancement sometimes requires understanding that moving forward is a form of warfare. Next up, natural forces. You know, the Red Sea wasn't a person, right? It was just there, a massive geographical problem. This framework argues that our circumstances, things like a bad economy, a sudden health crisis, or just a logistical nightmare, can be used to stop our progress. But, and this is key, they're not seen as absolute dead ends. The third force is identified as a direct spiritual adversary, and the source points right to the Apostle Paul, who didn't mince words. He said it plainly. Satan hindered me. So this view presents resistance not as just random bad luck, but sometimes as a deliberate, targeted opposition from an enemy that does not want you to fulfill your purpose. And this brings us to the final and maybe the most critical force of resistance. You. Yeah. After you navigate all the external stuff, people, circumstances, spiritual attacks, the argument is that the biggest battle is often the one going on inside. Your own mindset, your habits, your will can be a bigger wall than anything else. So let's really dig into this internal battle for a minute because it's a huge deal. According to this teaching, it really comes down to two main fronts: the negative thoughts you allow in your head and the appetites you just haven't brought under control. This slide just lays it out so clearly, doesn't it? It's the internal war. On one side, you've got the mindset that looks at the giants in the land and says, no way we can't win, they're too strong. But on the other side, you've got this David mindset, which looks at the valley of the shadow of death and says, you know what? God is with me. I have nothing to fear. The perspective you choose to feed is the one that wins. And here's the crucial point. According to this perspective, your own negative thinking can actually limit what God is able to do in your life. Because your will is respected, if you decide something is impossible, you're basically given it permission to be true in your reality. You can inadvertently block the very breakthrough you're praying for. The second internal barrier is all about untamed appetites, our emotions, our desires, our impulses. The metaphor used is that of an athlete. You know, an Olympian can't just roll out of bed and win a gold medal. They have to discipline their body for years. And in the same way, spiritual progress requires that same level of mastery over our internal world. Okay, so we've identified the four forces of resistance, we've talked about the problem, but the good news is the framework doesn't leave us there. It pivots right to the solution, which it claims is an authority that you've already been given. This is a massive, massive shift in perspective. The whole argument here is that the power to deal with all these forces isn't something you need to beg for or wait for. It's an authority you already have. And what that means is the timing of your freedom, of your breakthrough, well, it's not really up to God. It's up to you. It's in your hands.
So how do you actually do it? How do you use that authority? Well, the speaker points to the super clear three-step protocol from the book of James. Step 1, submit to God. That's about getting in complete alignment. Step 2, resist the devil. From that place of alignment, you actively stand your ground against all opposition. And the result? Step 3, he will flee from you. It's presented as a spiritual law, like gravity, a cause and an effect. Now, this authority is rooted in a very specific spiritual identity, which is called sons of God. And this isn't just a nice title, it's a position of actual rank and power, a legal standing. It means you can act as God's representative here on earth. So from this viewpoint, you're not a victim of your circumstances. You're an heir with the legal right to enforce a totally different outcome. You literally have access to the mind of Christ and are a joint heir with him. So with all this talk about overcoming resistance, what's the actual goal here? What does real, genuine advancement even look like in this framework? Well, it's defined in two very specific ways. First off, advancement means freedom. It's not about being busy, it's not about running around in circles. Real progress begins the second the chains break. The moment you are truly liberated from whatever has been holding you captive. It could be a debt, an addiction, a crippling mindset, whatever. Freedom is the first step. And the second part of advancement is promotion. This is a real, tangible change in your status and your influence. The example used is Jesus. He went into the wilderness as, a carpenter's son. He came back with so much authority that people called him a great light. That's advancement, an increase in your spiritual rank and the weight your very presence carries. And so we end right here with this question. After understanding all these forces of resistance and the authority you have to overcome them, the final thought is about your legacy. When the story of your time is written, where will your name be? Will it be a story of being held back by limitations, or a story of advancing and actually shaping the world around you? According to this framework, that answer is entirely up to you.